Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I really hope you're doing remarkably well, and loads of love to all my subscribers. You're all very special to me, and I do hope that you're going to go and get yourself something lovely and icy cold to drink, because the weather has been very hot, and I'm sure you need to cool down. And if you are drinking something really unique and different, do let me know about it, because I'm fascinated by that. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, the phone in the entrance hall rang and rang. Its ear-piercing shrill sound attacking my eardrums with its strident obtrusiveness, rather like a nagging old hag. All right, I said. Calm down, I'm coming. Keep your knickers on. I groaned, climbing out of the layers of my warm blanketed bed very begrudgingly, trembling as the icy coldness blasted my face, and I began to shiver. Bloody hell! I thought, this is really annoying. Our condo in Boston seemed to be so hot in the summer and icy cold in the winter, which meant getting out of bed at the crack of dawn was exceedingly laborious. I dubiously grabbed my dressing gown and threw it over my shoulders, along with my woolly slippers that tended to drag on the ground, making a very annoying squeaking sound. My poor wife heaved a pillow over her ears to try and block out the offending sounds that were rudely interrupting her dreams. Who the hell was phoning us at this ungodly time of the morning, I thought, glancing briefly at the clock. Oh my goodness, it was 2 o'clock, for goodness sake. Whoever was phoning us at this ungodly hour, they certainly better have a good excuse or explanation, I thought indignantly. All of a sudden, I seemed to wake up. The fuzzy haziness of my groggy state was hoisted up like the sails on a boat, as a scary thought glided across my mind, like a seagull soaring and flying into the heavenlies. My heart began to pound violently in my chest. It did not bode well for us. Someone to be phoning us this early, I mean. It must be important, I thought. I quickened my pace and hurriedly scurried to the phone. My hands began to tremble uncontrollably. I was shaking like a leaf as I regarded the receiver, like a threatening hazard that could potentially explode and blow up in my hand like a small pipe bomb hidden in a package in the post. What I can only describe as a wavering hesitancy and a diffident reluctance gripped me violently, like a very angry drunken man challenging me at a local bar. In a trice, I desperately tried to fight and conquer this debilitating fear, and it wasn't easy. Finally, with a renewed sense of courage that rose up like a surfer's breaker that I was desirous to overcome, I finally lifted up the receiver to my ear. "Hello," I said in a timid, uncertain voice. "Hello, sir," came the very slick voice at the other end of the line. "I'm very sorry to phone you at this inconvenient time of the morning, but I do have you registered as the next of kin for a Mrs. Cassandra DeSantis. Is that right?" "Yes, that is right. She's my deceased mother's older sister," I explained. "And you are Claudia DeSantis. Is that right?" "Yes, sir, I am he. Is everything all right? Something hasn't happened to Cassandra? Please, no. She is all right, isn't she?" The tentative, almost ambivalent voice at the other end of the line softened considerably into a sympathetic tone, and my heart held on to its beat, as if holding my breath underwater. Every part of me sensed that this phone call was not good news, and my instinctive feelings were not wrong. "I am sorry, sir, but I do have some very bad news for you. Very unfortunate news, I'm afraid. News I wish I didn't have to convey to you. You are not on your own, are you? Because you need someone there to support you." "No, my wife is here with me." "Good. You will be needing her support, Mr. DeSantis. I regret to have to inform you that your Aunt Cassandra DeSantis was found lying hanged in her closet this evening by a neighbour who was checking in on her to see she was all right. I'm afraid it was self-inflicted. A suicide, I believe. I'm truly sorry for your very tragic loss, and I would love to express my deepest condolences to you and your family. All of a sudden I went numb. A heavy lump developed at the back of my throat. I was unable to find any words for a second. I had lost my ability to speak. I stood at the phone like a waxwork statue at Madame Tussauds, unable to comprehend what I'd heard. Mr. DeSantis! Mr. DeSantis! Mr. DeSantis! Came the concerned voice. Are you still there, Mr. DeSantis? Mr. DeSantis, are you there? Yes, I said. Is she really dead? You're not being serious, are you? She can't be. I'm so sorry, sir. I wish I could say otherwise, I really do. Would you like me to send a grief counsellor around to your home? I've got some names here about people in Boston who could help you. No, thank you. I'll be fine, I said. Thank you very much for letting me know. I put down the receiver and stared into space, my body immobilized by shock. Cassandra, my only surviving relative, had hung herself in her closet. I'd only seen her last weekend, and she had appeared to be in such good form. But maybe that had just been a clever little act on her part to mask how rotten she was really feeling. But why? Why would she do this to herself? Of course, I knew the answer to that question before I even asked it. Cassandra had been suffering from the long drawn-out effects of fibromyalgia, a very debilitating illness that saps and drains your energy like a blood-sucking leech. It causes twitches, muscle cramps, and shooting pains that can be so dreadful it's almost unbearable for the sufferer. Then there's the booming, thunderous migraine headaches, the restlessness, the inability to sleep, the exhaustion, the impaired memory, and the heavy clouds of depression and despair that are as enfeebling, disabling, and compromising as the illness itself. My wife Lucy was standing in the entrance hall, staring at me. Her blonde ringlets tousled wildly around her face, and her blue eyes looked wide with fear. "Oh, my goodness! What's happened?" she said. "You look as white as a ghost. You're scaring me. Is everything all right?" I'd never been one to cry, but tears poured down my cheeks. I shook my head wearily. "Cassandra is dead!" I cried, and then I began to scream, "She's dead! She's dead! Oh, my God! My only surviving relative in the world is dead!" "You're not alone," said my wife, cradling me in her arms. "You have me." That had all happened about 2 months ago, and Cassandra had left us her entire estate in the Montana countryside, which included her enchanting, beguiling farmhouse, which was in a remote part of the world, a full 25 minutes away from the local town, which wasn't that bad. My wife and I were from Boston, otherwise known as Beantown, but had always fancied moving to the countryside, and Cassandra's death had prompted us to seize this fabulous opportunity with both hands. We had decided to experiment by living in Cassandra's farmhouse for a while, to discern if long-term this new, more carefree way of life would befit us, as we were novices to the rural lifestyle. We wondered if we would get homesick for the swinging city, its buzzing activity, fabulous eateries and restaurants, sophisticated culture from art galleries, theatres to museums, and so much more. This was the beginning of a fabulous whole new adventure for us in the Rocky Mountain Big Sky State, rather like tasting a whole new ice cream flavour for the very first time in your life, and discerning whether you were partial to it or not. And it can be a question of acclimatising to new people, a new environment, and a brand new way of life. I was very privileged and fortunate to be able to work from home and return to my company in Boston every couple of months for a day or so. Montana is an exquisite part of the world, and it is a varied state of statuesque mountains, rivers, canyons, valleys, grassy fields, badlands and caverns. So what was there not to like about this adventure? Our car ambled happily down the windy dirt roads, which seemed to go on for ever and ever, while the tough, hardy tyres of our burgundy-coloured Toyota Land Cruiser seemed to siphon up the clouds of brown dust in the air. You could hear the little pebbles beating under its underbelly. It didn't help that the wind whistled through the trees, making the journey rather more precarious. I heaved a huge sigh of relief as our four-wheel drive meandered down the tree-shaded drive of Douglas firs and ponderosa pines towards the farmhouse. It was signposted Whispering Pines, which was a very apt name, I thought. "We're here," I said, pulling up the handbrake and switching off the engine. For a moment there was a long silence in the car, and my wife and I just sat there for a while, not saying a single word. We stared at the farmhouse, almost as if we were viewing it for the very first time in our lives. I could see Cassandra's colourful free-range chickens in the front yard, pecking away hungrily and happily in the flower beds that were full of larkspurs, asters and Jacob's ladders, and the magnificent, glorious hanging baskets filled with blue lobelia and petunias, and the terracotta pots of colourful mixed geraniums looked like someone had been diligently watering them because they were bursting with delicate rose-like blooms, and even the lavish emerald green lawns in the front yard appeared to have been mown with meticulous precision. Some kindly neighbour had been looking after the place very attentively, I thought. I would certainly need to express my extreme appreciation to them. It was clear that we had very good neighbours. I felt an uneasy edginess overcome me, almost as if the house itself was watching me with a pair of judicious eyes. It was an attractive box-shaped symmetrical farmhouse, painted in a soft lemon-yellow colour, with lines of straight blue framed wooden windows with matching shutters across the facade of the house. It was extremely pleasing to the eye. Even more appealing to me was the expansive front deck that stretched the full length of the building and overlooked the resplendent panoramic mountainous views to the rear of our home. On the right side of our pretty yard was a woodland expanse with hiking trails and an enchanting creek. When I was a little boy, I would play in those woods a great deal. I used to love messing around in that creek. For me it was a magical, verdant wonderland that I was looking forward to rediscovering all over again. "This is it," I said, climbing out of the car and chivalrously opening my wife's door for her, like a true Boston gentleman. We had not been back to the house since Cassandra's death. It appeared oppressive and dark, with all the yellowing, bedraggled curtains drawn, and there was a stale, musty heaviness that seemed to linger in the air, possibly a reflection of Cassandra's melancholy and sorrowful state of mind. I certainly believe that to be the case. "It's like you can feel the sad energy in the home," said my wife, looking perturbed. "Like you can pick up her sickness. I'm not sensitive, but it's like I can feel the footprint that she laid on this home, if you know what I mean. It's rather weird. We need to put our own footprint on this place now. Oh, by the way, I found this for you. It was in the entrance hall," she said, handing me an envelope addressed to me. I immediately recognised the familiar, curly, elegant handwriting, and my heart began to sink. Before I could think too deeply about it and have any misgivings, I swiftly tore open the envelope and read the letter. It read, "Dear Claudia, I have not taken the decision to end my life easily, but the pain of this debilitating disease has drained me. I feel like I'm hanging on to life by a thread, barely making through each day. It's a struggle and a drawn-out battle for me. A fight that I have lost, for this disease has won over my will to live. It's the pain, the unbearable pain, the pounding headaches that are just too much to bear. Please don't hate me for taking the easy way out, because believe me, it was not an easy choice to make, especially leaving you. I'm mindfully aware that you are the only surviving member of the DeSantis family, and it grieves my heart. But you can redeem that by having children of your own one day, and I sincerely hope you do. I'll be watching over you, in a place where I hope I can find a measure of peace. Please do not hate me for my choice. If there had been another option, I would most certainly have taken it. Remember that I love you forever. Your loving Aunt Cassandra. Oh, my word! That is so desperately sad, said my wife, her eyes misting over with tears. The poor woman! She must have been in dreadful pain. I'm absolutely appalled that the doctors were unable to keep that pain of hers under control. You would think they would do better than this in this day and age, wouldn't you? I mean, for people in Cassandra's condition. I remember her telling me that smoking cannabis medicinally had helped her considerably, but clearly not enough. Poor Cassandra, I said. She must have been desperate. Really desperate. Fast forward an entire month, and we had transformed our home with luxurious new curtains, a lick of fresh paint, and elegant, comfortable furnishings, alongside contemporary art pieces and some eclectic showstoppers. In a trice, our house was beginning to feel like our home, as if we had left our invisible mark on it. It would seem that the initial heavy, oppressive atmosphere that had lingered in our home like a noxious, putrid, rank, very bad smell had finally abated. My wife had smudged the place with sage and sprayed essential oils of orange and cinnamon in every nook and cranny, and the muggy, suffocating and stifling atmosphere had miraculously changed and lifted, and light seemed to permeate our house in a blissful warmth. It truly seemed to transmutate from a dreary, drab grey cocoon into a vibrant, colourful butterfly. As such was the transformation of our sumptuous, cosy and very snug home that made us very inclined to want to stay here permanently and lay down roots. We had met many of the locals who were warm, convivial and friendly people, who had been so welcoming towards us, including our immediate neighbour, a delightful woman called Becky Conway, who was the unfortunate one to discover my aunt hanging in her closet. Well, so I thought. It must have been about the second day we'd moved into our new home that Becky Conway, our next-door neighbour, rocked up at our front doorstep with a very generous, delectable basket of homemade goodies for us as a moving-in welcoming gift, which included a pretty pot of lavender violets, a baked lasagna, garlic bread, salad, a generous bottle of wine, and for afters a mouth-watering chocolate strawberry cheesecake. It didn't get better than that. "You can't expect us to eat this all alone," I said. "Why not join us for dinner? This is incredibly kind of you." "Actually, that would be really rather nice," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "It would be so lovely to get to know the two of you better. I hope we can be friends. Cassandra spoke of you a lot. She said only good things about you, of course, loved the bones of you, and saw you more like a son rather than a nephew." "Well, that is good to hear," I chuckled. "Do sit down and make yourself at home," I said, gesturing for her to sit down on the cosy settee. "My word, this is quite marvellous. You've completely transformed this home from a sow's ear into a silk purse, dare I say. Poor Cassandra, she didn't have the energy to invest in making her home into a cosy den, like you clearly have done." Becky was a gentle, very endearing woman in her early 60s, with a thick thatch of short brown hair and a wrinkle-free complexion, with of course the exception of some endearing crow's feet that crinkled around her pretty brown eyes when she smiled and only added to her charm. I could sense that she was an easy-going, laid-back sort of woman, with a very generous heart, the kind of woman that everybody would like as a neighbour. I imagine if you needed her help, she would be around in a heartbeat to ferry you to the local hospital or lend you a bag of sugar for that chocolate cake you were planning to bake. "You wouldn't happen to know who has been watering our plants and mowing our lawn and cleaning our pool in the backyard?" I asked. "Oh," laughed Becky, "that would be my husband Bernie. You haven't met him yet. I must introduce you. He did mow your lawns and clean the pools while you were away, but I was the one that did your watering." "We appreciate it so very much," I said. "It's very kind of you." "Only a pleasure," she said. "That's what neighbours do for each other, isn't it?" Before long we were tucking into delicious plates of hot lasagna and salad. "This is fabulous," I said, tucking into the moist layers of pasta, ground meat and cheese sauce. I gather you were the one to find my aunt hanging in the closet. I'm very sorry about that. It couldn't have been easy for you." "Actually, it is quite a story," said Becky, taking a sip of her wine. "That's not quite how it happened. I sensed there was something wrong with Cassandra, as I saw her almost every single day. She always used to bring me eggs from her chickens and vegetables from the backyard. She was very generous like that. But I hadn't seen her for a few days, so I was beginning to worry about her." "That means she must have been in a considerable amount of pain, I imagine." "Oh, Cassandra suffered terrible pain," admitted Becky, "but it had to be really incapacitating for her not even to leave her home for a few days. It was extraordinary. I remember I was lying in bed on the night she died. It must have been about midnight. I woke up with a start, and I began to shake my husband Bernie very vigorously. I said, 'Bernie, something's wrong with Cassandra. I can feel it in my gut. I've got to go and check on her.' I do remember he groaned and said something like, 'Can't you wait until the morning? Go back to sleep.' But of course I didn't listen. I can be bull-headed and obstinate at times." "You mean you sensed that something was wrong with Cassandra?" I asked in amazement. "Absolutely," said Becky, looking at me with very intense, earnest brown eyes. She was beginning to shiver as she recalled the event. It was exceedingly odd, because I'm not an intuitive person by any manner of means, but in my gut I truly felt as if something was terribly wrong. It felt as if there was something off that I couldn't quite determine what it was. It was like this sense of knowing overcame me. I was terrified about what I might discover, because there were times your aunt had secretly confided in me that she was in such horrendous, despicable pain that she had seriously considered flying to Switzerland for euthanasia. She'd even gone so far as to make inquiries. She really considered that." "Really? She said that to you?" I asked, looking appalled. "That's absolutely ghastly. I had no idea her pain was that bad." Becky nodded gingerly. "Fibromyalgia is a very distressing disease indeed. It's grossly misunderstood. Some doctors actually refuse to recognize it as a legitimate illness. But believe me, it's real. I've seen your aunt's courage and strength over the years, which has been admirable. She has faced such tortuous adversity and suffering. She's a remarkable woman, really. Anyway, I remember that night with a crystal clear clarity, but it wasn't pretty. No, it wasn't pretty at all. It was very cold with a gentle breeze blowing, and I got the sense that it was about to rain, as the air was enveloped with that earthy, clean smell. I love that smell. When it turned out, it did rain later. I hastily gathered my dressing gown over my shoulders and put on some sneakers as a matter of urgency, and ventured speedily towards your house, armed with a torchlight in my hands. I was terrified of what I might find. Well, she grimaced. I was more than just afraid. I was truly petrified. I was walking down the moist lawn towards the house, and your aunt's outside lights were luckily all on. I could see very clearly, although the moonlight was excellent that night, which meant I wasn't intimidated by the dusky darkness, which would normally have been the case. But I nearly had a heart attack, because I discerned a powerful muscular back of a tall, dark, shadowy form, removing your aunt's clothing from her washing line, with its overlong arms, and placing them very neatly in a pristine pile in her laundry basket. My first impression of the thing was that it was a man wearing a monkey suit, because when its head swiveled around in my direction, it had a distinctive human face, with very high cheekbones and a pronounced brow ridge, with a pyramid-shaped head. I tell you that even the skin colour and texture and tone rather reminded me of a Native American Indian. This thing could not have been a man, though, because he was huge, built like a giant, muscular, dense, stocky and powerful. It looked alarmed and bewildered when it saw me, and scurried away very quickly, with a frightened look on its face. I got the distinct impression he was disappointed to have been seen and observed, and caught off guard. I think he was naturally reticent and evasive by nature. He moved away very quickly, floating across the lawn, and his arms seemed to be gliding backwards and forwards as he moved, like someone power-walking. I'd never seen anything like that before. He moved so fast, just like a cheetah.
So what do you think this thing was? I asked, looking rather perturbed.
I'm not sure, really. I don't know what I thought it was, but as I said, the creature was way too big to be human, because it was 8 foot tall. You don't get humans that tall, and 3 feet wide across the very powerful shoulder area. And I would hasten to bet he was over 600 pounds, but he wasn't overweight or fat. We're talking about 600 pounds of dense, heavy muscle. He was covered in long, flowing hair that was scant under the arms and around the knee area, which I suppose makes sense given the friction of skin in those areas. I did wonder why it was removing your aunt's washing, as though he was helping her. I wondered if she was familiar and acquainted with this creature. It was a distinct possibility, although she's never mentioned it to me. I mean, it was incredibly human-looking, with the exception of being covered in very long hair. And the hair was very neat and very fine. It looked almost as if it had been brushed. And when the creature held my gaze for a moment with its deep-set dark eyes, I could tell it was incredibly intelligent. And when I say intelligent, I'm not talking about the intelligence of a dog or gorilla. I'm talking about the same intelligence of a human, possibly more. Were you frightened? No, not at all. That's the funny, very peculiar thing. Maybe I should have been. I was too mystified and intrigued because I couldn't fathom or comprehend what this creature actually was. And when I went back home and told Bernie about my mysterious encounter, he was unable to believe my incredulous account. It was too fantastical for him and outlandish. He couldn't take it on board, which I suppose I did understand, although it was enormously frustrating for me to have a husband that was too cynical to believe my story. Anyway, back to what I was saying. I wanted to focus on the job at hand and check that Cassandra was all right. So you can imagine my surprise when I discovered the blue front door was ajar, and the wind kept banging it backwards and forwards against the frame, and it was creaking. It was a haunting, surreal and ghostly experience, like something that you would rather expect to encounter in a horror movie. I stood there calling out Cassandra's name, but she didn't answer. I also got the sense that something was watching me from the trees. I guessed it might have been the anomalous creature that I'd seen at the washing line. I certainly suspected as much. I glanced back towards the thick fringe of ponderosa pines, but I couldn't see anything, but I certainly felt the eyes on me. I wasted no time and ran through the house, racing up the staircase, and my heart sank when I saw a big trail of muddy footprints entrenched in the cream carpets on the stairs. It was one hell of a mess. I came to the swift conclusion that this intimidating creature had been in the house, and based on his appearance, I was worried that he might have hurt your aunt. By this stage, my heart began to race and thunder in my chest, and I began to almost have a panic attack. I quickly ran up to your aunt's bedroom like a bat out of hell, expecting the very worst. "So you found her then hanging in the closet," I said. "That must have been dreadful. I just can't imagine." "Well, not exactly," said Becky. "I actually could see that she had hung herself, as there was rope still around her neck. But she was lying on a bed of soft moss and covered with pretty wild flowers that were scattered all over her body like colourful confetti. She looked so peaceful and really quite beautiful. I'm so used to seeing the pronounced tension in her forehead, but in death there was none of that. On the contrary, she looked younger, prettier, more relaxed. She was definitely at peace, and her body was still very warm, so I think she had only recently just killed herself." I gasped. "Are you being serious? She was still warm? You found her like that, covered in flowers and on a bed of moss?" "Not only that, there was a stone placed in her hand, a pretty stone. I was sure there was a significance behind the stone, but I don't know what it was," she said, opening her handbag to hand it over to us. It was a very attractive stone, but what its purpose was, I never found out. "You think the creature that you saw took my aunt down from the hanging rope in the closet?" "I do," said Becky. "I genuinely do. Whatever he was, he really adored your aunt. For 2 weeks after her death, I promise you, I genuinely heard howling from the woods, like something lamenting and wailing.
It was very distressing. Even Bernie said something was very, very upset. I knew it must be the creature. He was mourning your aunt's demise. I'm certain of it. I know it sounds peculiar, but I think he loved your aunt, like a really good friend. He must have been quite attached to her, but she never told me about the friendship. Perhaps she thought I'd never believe her. It's all very sad, she said, wiping away a tear. This whole wretched business, it's all desperately sad, and such a waste to lose your aunt like this. What did the police have to say? I asked. Well, they have never seen anything like it before, and were indeed very perplexed and puzzled about the sheer scale of large footprints on the stairs, and the mossy undergrowth that Cassandra was lying on in her death. At first, they didn't rule out foul play, and thought that an intruder had tried to murder her, and make it look like suicide, and did a lousy job to cover up their tracks. But they did think that the perpetrator had exceedingly large feet. The police were reassured when the coroner swiftly arrived on the scene to allay their fears to rest, because she finally confirmed that there was no foul play in Cassandra's death, and that she definitely hung herself, and someone had taken her down from the rope, but no one knew who that was, except me, of course, and I wasn't going to tell anyone about it. I didn't want them to think I was barking mad. I must say, said Becky, I'm so glad I never saw her hanging there. That would have been very tough for me, so the creature was kind taking her down like that. It was good of him to do that. Fast forward to the summer, a whole year later, when I found that the dried washing on our line was regularly replaced on our front doorstep before it was about to rain heavily, and was always neatly folded. My wife and I have never been that tidy. It was as if someone had realised it was going to rain, and they collected our washing from the line before it got soaked, which was a kind, spontaneous thing for them to do. It certainly made me wonder if it was the work of the hairy humanoid. Then, of course, there was another time when a box of berries landed up on our front doorstep, and no one confirmed that they had been responsible for gifting us, so we were perplexed as to where they came from. Once again, I do think it was the work of the hairy critter. One lovely summer's day, when the sun permeated the air in a blissful, congenial warmth, I ambled very happily into the woods, feeling mellow, jubilant, and serene. I was well acquainted and familiar with the resplendent wooded area that I frequented regularly as a young boy, when Aunt Cassandra had been alive. Granted, the trees were much bigger and fuller and far more impressive looking than when I was young. This was the quintessential playground I had played with my water pistol or slingshot as a young boy. Now, as an older man in my early 30s, I was replacing the slingshot and water pistol with a very impressive hunting rifle that would most certainly have bedazzled and beguiled the younger me. I had acquired some hunting training the previous year and was eager to try out my hand as a complete novice in the wooded area on our property. I could feel my heart thumping in my chest with excitement in the anticipation of the hunt. I had erected my own stand on a cedar tree that I felt would be a prime location to sit and wait for a good stag to hunt. The trouble is, I had that stand personally made for me, and I ensured it was very comfortable and luxurious, shall we say, because I'm big on my creature comforts, and I can't really apologise for that. The previous summer I had gained some training from a hunting enthusiast, and I fancied doing some hunting all on my own. The wooded area branches out quite significantly into a large sweep of publicly owned land that looks like an extension of our own property, as the owners have failed to fence in the dividing perimeters, which means we have had hikers trailing across our property quite frequently. It's exquisitely beautiful and like a blissful verdant sanctuary full of Douglas firs, ponderosa pines, western hemlocks, red maples and spruce trees. As I entered the pristine forest, the buzzes, the tweets, the warbles and trills were very pleasing to my ears. I climbed into my stand and began to wait. I was waiting an awfully long time. I became increasingly frustrated, pondering whether I was cut out of the right cloth to be a hunter. The waiting bothered me. I will admit that the heartbeat of the forest and the energy of the trees was very relaxing. I'm very embarrassed to have to admit this, and I truly hope that this has happened to other hunters other than myself, and not exclusively to me. But I closed my eyes for a second, and then I fell asleep. When I woke up, it was late afternoon, early evening, and I had not intended to be out here for this long. I must have been asleep for many hours, and to my horror, my rifle had fallen off my tree stand and was lying on the ground beneath me, buried beneath the pine needles. A couple of very large stag deers were eating some of the apples and corn I dropped around the tree, but my rifle was now on the ground. If I tried to extract it from the ground, the deer would inevitably scuttle away. I was really mad at myself for having fallen asleep. Suddenly the two stags became anxious and afraid. Their ears perked up quickly. They had heard or sensed something, and they quickly leapt away. Then the forest became soundless and disturbingly quiet. Something was coming towards me that sounded like a large sack of potatoes dropping on the ground every few seconds. And then I saw the creature that I now know to be a Bigfoot. Nothing prepares you for seeing something as massive as a Bigfoot. King Kong, here we come. That is how intimidating and impressive the Bigfoot was. His body was built for power and efficiency, like a streamlined machine. I would describe him as being so incredibly human, only much bigger than a human being, and covered in dark hair with auburn and golden tones that rather remind me of the tones of a German shepherd. I watched the creature collecting pine needles on the ground and gathering them together in a large mound. Then he crushed the needles under his feet with twisting movements, using his feet like a pestle and mortar, as if he was stamping grapes or herbs, turning them into a pulp with very little difficulty at all. And then, to my amazement, he began to rub the natural oil of pine all over his body, over his long arms and his muscular legs. The creature then glided past me, and I could smell the intoxicating, woody, citrusy smell of pine enveloping the air, and it was a magnificent infusion, although why he did that, I don't know. I'm glad the creature did not see me, because I would have been very scared to have a one-on-one encounter with him. But I'm willing to bet that he had a friendship with Cassandra, who never shared her Bigfoot secret with me. From time to time we have our washing collected for us from the line, and the occasional berries delivered to our front doorstep. I think the creature is doing this to honour the memory of Cassandra, not for us, but for her. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, goodbye and good night.